to Android Design in Action. I'm your host, Roman Urich.
Hey guys, my name is Adam Kosh.
And hi, I'm Nick Butcher.
And today's episode is about the Beautiful Design collection on Google Play. And I think it was about a month or so ago that we released a collection on Google Play called the Beautiful Design Collection for summer 2013. And this is a collection of 11 apps that highlighted some of the kind of best of class, or I guess some of the best designed apps on Google Play. So in today's episode, we're going to look through these different apps on our tablet here, and we're going to talk about some of the best kind of design details in each app. And then I think we'll have time to go through all 11 apps, and then we have a couple of things at the end that we'll show as well. So with that, any other intro, guys, before we jump in? No? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about how these apps were kind of picked. I think that the idea behind this collection is that these are applications which, really embrace the design guidelines, but kind of also go beyond that, and really kind of, have that level above that adds the polish that makes it a beautifully designed application.
Absolutely. So let's see. So the collection from the blog post that we posted about this collection talks a lot about attention to detail, and it's not really about just kind of getting the 80% of the app or 90% of the app looking great. It's really just adding that final 10% of fit and finish and polish that, again, like Nick said, goes above and beyond just following the guidelines, and really kind of stressing that that every single part of the app must be polished, and really kind of you have to think about every single flow that the user would go through. And so these 11 apps we found contain some of these masterfully crafted design details. And so that's why these were chosen. Obviously, this is only 11 apps. There are tons more beautiful apps out there in Google Play. This is just kind of the first set of, or I guess the first collection in this set, in this series. You should expect more in the future, in the coming, I guess, different seasons, since this is just a summer 2013 collection. And we also wanted to mention that very recently, there's some other apps that have been published, and Matias Duarte, who's the director of user experience for Android, had this really long Google Plus post that talked about kind of where the guidelines sit in terms of the design process, how you should approach the guidelines, what types of decisions you should be thinking about, where you should begin introducing branding and consistency and things like that. And so while we're on the topic, I guess, of the Beautiful Design collection, which again, the apps there do follow the guidelines, but they go above and beyond that. While we're on the topic of this, I think that this post really kind of summarizes some of the Android design team's views on the guidelines and consistency and where they fit in. So with that, should we jump in with the first app? Okay.
Good.
So the first app we're going to look at, and so actually these are the apps that we're going to look at today. We have Pattern, Eye in the Sky, Pocket, Timer, Grand Street, Pinterest, Press, a lot of P's, Press, New York Times, Expedia, Flipboard, and TED. So those are the 11 apps in that collection. So the first of these is Pattern. So Pattern is basically an app that lets you look at different wallpapers, and actually these wallpapers are all pattern tiles, hence the name Pattern. So they kind of tile across. They're not just one big photo or anything like that. But it's really something that lets you browse and browse pattern wallpapers and set them. So we're only looking at a tablet today. One of the key things in this collection, actually, before we jump in here, is that most, if not all, of these apps are really kind of responsively designed. So this is one of the, and meaning, it works on tablet, it works on phone, it works on 7-inch, and so on. And so, this app right now is one of the best examples of a kind of a very nice standard responsive design, where basically on a tablet here you see multiple columns of patterns or of wallpapers, and on a phone you'd actually see fewer columns, maybe just one column and 2 columns of landscape. And then you have your kind of core navigation on the left. You basically can jump in between or switch between different sections. And then you can open up one of these wallpapers, and one of the nice touches is that they have these very subtle animations here that let you kind of see more. And actually it also kind of goes into lights out mode. So you actually fade out or you dim the navigation bar and the status bar in the process. Now, one of the last things I wanted to mention about this app, and obviously the responsive design, I think for me is one of the biggest things about it that makes it so great. One of the last things is that there are subtle little touches here and there, like letting you rotate the wallpaper, set the wallpaper automatically on a schedule, and then also just kind of the overall fit and finish. It really does feel like it does feel like a really truly Android designed app. So overall, just a very solid app, and it's the first one in our collection. Should we move on to Pinterest?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Pinterest. So for those of you who are not familiar with Pinterest, it's a social networking app that sort of revolves around these virtual pin boards where you can pin up virtual content. I will admit I am not a big Pinterest user myself, but that doesn't mean I can't play with the app and use the app and see how it's beautifully designed. So the first thing you'll notice, and this is kind of interesting because there's no sort of standard action bar. And of course, if you've listened to any of our shows, we're always talking action bar, action bar, action bar. But in this case, they've actually gone for sort of almost like a hybrid between top-level tabs, which you may see in an app like, say, the People app, and the sort of standard action bar where you have branding normally in the top left. And it actually works nicely because on their website, they have this sort of same design and layout. So you can see here, they've still got the sort of standard interaction patterns of swiping between these tabs. Where the middle tab is really sort of home or browse your stream. And the left tab, while it does have a search icon, it's more of a like discover tab or something along those lines. And so that's sort of the first thing I wanted to call out. The second thing is this multi-column layout. And that's, again, very similar to their website. And this is really nice because obviously the social network revolves heavily around content, so it's very content-forward design. And it has the added advantage that it's also very responsive. It scales very well to different screen sizes. As we mentioned before, we couldn't show you the phone layout today, but you'll see on the phone layout and on the smaller tablet or portrait layouts, you'll see that it sort of reduces the number of columns nicely there.
One of the best things about this really quick is that the Chrome of the app, like the bar at the top, I guess the action/tab bar, the bar at the top follows the kind of the natural Android interaction model, but the content is very much Pinterest. It's very much kind of Pinterest branded content almost, like the exact layout of the posts is very much kind of a Pinterest thing. So that's how they kind of one of the ways in which they let their brand show.
And they've also sort of fused their brand design with the Holo design language. So you sort of see the Holo design tabs. You sort of see the buttons are much flatter than what they have on their website and on other platforms. They have sort of the overflow down here. So they've done a very good job at sort of the middle ground between fusing Android design with their own brand.
And just one little thing on Pinterest, I absolutely love the way, as it's loading in a new image, it'll take the average color of the image, right? Yeah, there we go. So the kind of color shown, will be the average color of the image once it's loaded. It's a completely unnecessary detail that I love. It kind of is delightful.
Yeah, it's like one extra database field, right? But for a lot more value there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, great. So that's Pinterest. We really like the Pinterest app. Pocket.
Nick, you want to talk about Pocket?
Yeah, absolutely. So Pocket, hopefully is kind of a catch-up reading of the news site, so you can save sites, videos, images, and so forth into your Pocket and catch up later. So when trying to pick what I wanted to highlight in this application, I initially thought about the responsive design, because like these other applications we looked at so far, this app responds beautifully to the form factor of the device you're looking at it on. So on a phone, for example, it'll use like a list-based navigation when you kind of in a quicker scan mode, and as you get to larger devices, it breaks out into a grid, and then there's kind of asymmetric grid, as you can see here. If you have more content, there'll be lots of different tasks.
Sorry about not filling it out completely.
I forgot to add
no problem. But in fact, my favorite detail I think about this application is the sheer focus on the reading experience. The application does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't feel heavy in its kind of user interface. Everything seems to get out of the way in order to let you have the best reading experience. So for example, the user interface here, the action bar and so forth, is all quite muted. So it immediately recedes out of the way. And if you can start scrolling down through the article, as soon as you start scrolling,
short
that's a
one.
very
Sorry.
short article, were it longer, as soon as you start scrolling down, the action bar hides. And once again, we go into this, what we refer to lights out mode, where the system bar and the notification bar recede into a kind of slightly dim state. So it's all about the reading experience. But as soon as you start scrolling back up, which kind of indicates you've finished the article, for example, the affordances jump right back. So you can check the time or multitask to another app or use one of the action bar options. So it just gets out of your way and it just works. And I love that focus on the reading experience. And the same thing's true of their kind of pagination model. So you can either read it in a kind of like endless stream, so we're swiping up and down, or you can swipe left and right to change to like a paginated content model. And I love the fact that there's no, you can imagine that one way of implementing that interface will be some kind of toggle or switch or machinery in order to do it. But instead of doing that, they just listen to how you're trying to use it. So if you scroll vertically, then it'll give you a vertical stream of content, and if you scroll horizontally, then it'll just automatically flip into this paginated content model. So again, it just reduces all the machinery around it and just really, really focuses on getting out of your way and letting you get to the content. So really, really great attention to detail in this app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I'd say that it's one of the best kind of in-reading experiences. If at all you need to build an app that lets you kind of read through large chunks of content, a large body copy, definitely look at this app as kind of a shining example of how to do that right.
Yeah, it looks a lot different once it's filled out with content. I mean, we did a bad job at pre-populating it today. But
all right, shall we move on to Timer? So Timer is a very, very simple app. Let's
start the ADIA timer.
Oh yeah, sure. So Timer is basically an app that it's just that. It's a timer. It has a couple of features. It has basically I think it has a stopwatch. Does it have a stopwatch? Actually, don't remember. But it basically has a countdown timer. It's just kind of your standard run-of-the-mill countdown timer. But the best thing about this is the interactions and the kind of the little ways in which they sprinkle kind of Android goodness. So for example, if you pull down the shade here, Android Design in Action is live. That's good. You'll notice that the notification is very customized, and they have actions built into the notifications. So without even, let's say I'm just at the home screen here, I can manage my timer right from here. So I can pause and resume it. I can see how much time is remaining, and I can obviously end it if I needed to. But also, one of my other favorite things about this was that the interaction for creating a timer is very simple and intuitive. So you basically just kind of drag this thing around, and sorry for the lag here, I think our HDMI connection is laggy. But you basically just drag this around, and it's very tactile and kind of visceral. The feeling of kind of rotating a dial, it almost hints back to the earlier days of kind of like a rotary telephone almost. So the interaction model here is very nice. It's also very simple. The last thing I want to point out is that they have a couple of themes, and while having multiple themes is not a necessity, it's always kind of like a nice extra touch. And they also basically theme everything. So if you switch from the light blue to the light orange theme, basically everything becomes orange. The action bar tabs, even the app icon becomes orange. So you can see here kind of their single accent color changes to kind of fit what the user prefers. So overall, very nice, simple app. Obviously also using responsive design best practices. They have a tablet version. It works in portrait, landscape, 7-inch, 10-inch. So just an overall very solid, very simple app that kind of just gets the job done. I think next we have Grand Street.
Yeah, just before we jump into that, one last really subtle touch that I really like about this is, and you can't really see it now, is that in the actual rich notification, they have that same circular representation of the timer, which actually fills in with the color of the theme that you chose.
Yeah, if you just do
a shorter timer, maybe.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, just do 1 minute.
We could probably use this app to make sure we don't overrun it.
I know we should use it every week, actually.
Is it okay?
Let's leave it running.
Anyway, okay. Okay.
All right, let's move on to Grand Street. So I'm gonna switch this to featured. And
oh no!
Oh, demo fail.
Curse of the demo.
Yeah, there we go.
Demo fail. So Grand Street, for those of you not familiar with it, is basically a gadget catalog, curated gadget catalog. and the Grand Street team goes and sort of finds these interesting gadgets and then reviews them and then posts them up through their app and through their website. And the first thing you'll notice is it's basically like a digital magazine. They've essentially converted what the old school version of a physical magazine into a digital magazine. And you can see it's instantly full screen imagery, really nice typography. And they've actually gone for this sort of custom action bar, but very much sticking to the interaction patterns and the layout, the sort of gist of the regular action bar. You can see they've got their app icon in the top left, a spinner next to that, and then they've left the area between that empty, and then they've got the regular sort of action items and overflow on the right there. I think it works really well for sort of taking the focus off the UI elements and then bringing the focus to the actual content of the application. So you can see here, they've got these like dots representing the different pages of the magazine, and then this is one of the products. Let's go into it here. And then they've got this really nice representation of the actual review and content. So between each of the screens, there's actually these full screen images, and around subtle design touches, you can see here it sort of fades in as you swipe up. You can read some information about the design, and then again see another really nice full screen image here. And an interesting thing that we can't actually show here is that if you go into portrait mode, there's a slightly different representation, and where you can view the images at the top of the screen and then the content below that. Can't show that here because we're on HDMI and it's kind of hard to rotate around. And then I'm not going to talk too much more about this because we're low on time, but for previous items that they've talked about, the sort of non-featured items, they had this just sort of nice, clean grid view of items. And again, it's multi-column, so it scales very well to different screen sizes. You can go back and browse all of the previous items that they'd actually reviewed in the past.
And
Cool.
the Grand Street team actually did a really nice blog post about the iterations of design they went through in order to arrive here. So if you check out their blog, that'll be
Cool.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to share that in the comments somehow.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite thing about this app is just the complete kind of focus on full bleed imagery and typography, and that really makes it feel more like a magazine because there's no Chrome in magazines, there's no buttons you can press in a magazine. It's really all content that you're playing with. So this really feels like that.
And they even go to the point of engaging the low profile mode so that you're really sort of engaged in the full screen content.
Yep.
All right.
All right, let's move on to Eye in the Sky weather. Nick, do you want to talk about Eye in the Sky?
Yep. Okay, so my favorite thing about this application is the sheer simplicity of it and the way it kind of elegantly shows the information hierarchy. So I think they do a really, really great job of really picking out the most important information and then making the flow of that information really obvious. So it instantly jumps out at you what the immediate conditions are, and then you can tell by kind of the layout and so forth what the upcoming dates are. I think it's a very simple application. I mean, there's a ton of weather applications out there, but I think this one in particular does a great job of just elegantly displaying what you need to know and putting everything within easy reach. Once again, it's also another example, I think like all of the apps in this collection, of great responsive design. So it'll move on a phone device. You'll have these three major sections on the left will be swipeable tabs, and on the larger device over a certain point, they kind of get broken out into this dedicated navigation section, and it kind of rearranges what we kind of call the kind of macro reflow. It rearranges the major content blocks in order to use the space well.
I also personally love the upgrade banner at the bottom. It's not in your face. You can actually dismiss it, and I think if you dismiss it, it shows ads. But basically, well, at some point it shows, yeah, there it is. But it's basically kind of like an unobtrusive way to hint at other features that are available. Or, it's kind of like an upsell, but it's an unobtrusive upsell, basically. So it's kind of a nice way of doing that.
Yeah, I think weather apps are actually an interesting problem because there's so much information you can display, and it's actually challenging to sort of get everything displaying in a nice, concise format, as Nick was saying.
Yeah. Should we move on?
Yeah, we
All right.
need to go quickly.
All right. What are we at? 10:48. That's fine. We got plenty of time, guys. All right. Next, let's look at Press. So Press is an app that, let me just go to the very beginning here. Press is an app that is basically your feed reader. Formerly, it hooked up to Google Reader, so it was basically a Google Reader client. It would show you all your different subscriptions and all the different articles that you haven't read under each subscription. And now it supports a variety of different services, including Feedly, which is what we have hooked up here. But the idea is that it's basically a client for your kind of your reading stuff, your kind of reading queue. It's kind of I would call it kind of the pre-Pocket. You look at something here, and maybe if you want to read it later, you throw it into
That's definitely my
Pocket.
workflow, like
Yeah.
press to Pocket.
Yeah. But the idea here, and the reason we like this app so much is that it's just very clean, again, very minimal. It's all about content. You can even look here, the tabs here on the left. And actually on a phone, this would be one screen here on the left, and this would be kind of the next screen. But you basically have tabs here on the left, and the icons for the tabs are incredibly minimal. The filled circle means that it's unread. The outline circle means it's read, and the star just means it's your starred content. So it's kind of a very very interesting workflow. You basically have your step one, you have stuff that you haven't read. Step two is the next evolution of that stuff you've read, and step three is stuff that you really care about and you've starred. So the hierarchy there is very clear. So once you jump into a category and then a feed, let's look at The Verge, for example. Actually, yeah, The Verge is fine. That'll do.
You do all.
Oh yeah, let's look at all subscriptions. So you basically have this very simple master detail flow on the left, master detail flow, and you can kind of expand this fully, and you have another very, very nice reading view. Now, the one thing that I love about this app is that the typography is great. You have lots of different choices for fonts, but their default choice, I think it's Source Sans by Adobe, looks great here. The other thing is that there are some variations to the design guidelines. So, for example, if you long press, you get this kind of embedded contextual actions. We generally prefer doing things a different way, but it is one way of doing things. And actually, the nice thing about doing it this way is that it offers an in-place contextual kind of mark everything above me as red, mark everything below me as red. So it's almost like you have an immediate sense of what you're marking as red. In general, we tend to use the contextual action bar instead, but this is kind of an alternative. And then they have nice little touches. You can mark something as red here, and things like that. So overall, it's a very well branded app. You'll see that the highlights throughout are this very kind of sharp red, and the general color scheme is kind of it's almost like USSR, like dark gray and like bright red. It's almost a little not stoic, but it's almost like I guess USSR colors. But it's kind of cool. It gives it a very simple, sharp feeling. So that's Press, and like we said before, it is very much following responsive design best practices. Supports tablets, phones, all sorts of things.
All right, let's keep going. All right, so the next app is New York Times. Hopefully you're familiar with New York Times. It's a very well-known newspaper. And we really like this app. What they've done here really is use two things which are very sort of central core to the Android design guidelines, is typography and white space, to really sort of show hierarchy and also make it feel like a newspaper. So you can immediately see here the titles of each article really jumps out at you. And then it's got sort of the brief blurb below that, and then some imagery in certain cases. So let's have a look at one of the articles here. It's a very clean layout. I also like how they've used white space on the sides here to bring in the margins to make it a better reading experience. And as sort of recommended, they have this swipe to navigate between articles.
The images are really, really crisp. So they're serving the right size images for tablets.
Yep. And they've done also a great job here of again merging this sort of brand colors. In particular, typography really sort of screams New York Times. Like you can kind of look at this and immediately you're like, oh, that looks like the New York Times. That feels like the New York Times. But it also feels very much Android, very much holo designed.
One quick thing about typography I wanted to mention is that in general, you can't just throw any TTF file at Android's rendering engine. Just because it may look great on your desktop machine doesn't mean it will look great on Android. Specifically, there are some character spacing things that come up with fonts that aren't optimized. So New York Times' font here is specifically optimized for mobile. So it works just great with Android's native type rendering system.
Now, obviously, the focus of New York Times is on text, on reading, on articles, but they also actually have a really nice photo screen. And they have,
Those are
as
nice.
Roman was saying, like the images are really crisp, really nice. This is on a Nexus 10. They engage the low profile mode here, so you can really just get immersed in these images. And they have a similar screen for videos as well. All right, let's keep going.
All right, next we have Expedia. Nick, you want to talk about Expedia?
Yeah, it's almost a shame we're showing this on a tablet because they have quite different running modes on the tablet and the phone. And I think the phone's been updated most recently, and it kind of knocks my socks off. But kind of the aspects of the Expedia app that I really wanted to call out are the elements of kind of fun and whimsy which they introduced. So if you can see here, they have a loading spinner, which is like a hotel door hanger, and this is actually response to accelerometer. So I'm not sure we'll be able to show it.
For some reason we
If you
can't.
tilt the device side to side, this kind of like swings back and forth to kind of remain level. Things like that. All the animations are super smooth. And one of the things the application does really, really well, especially the phone one, is inspire you. So it uses kind of like imagery, like to inspire you about different destinations you might want to travel to. So it can, while searching for a hotel or a flight could be like quite a dry task, they actually really introduce fun elements and inspirational elements that make the kind of process much more enjoyable. You actually find yourself kind of really enjoying using the application.
Yeah, it is a shame we can't show the phone version. On the phone version, there's this kind of really beautiful two-tab system where on the first tab, you have this kind of parallax scrolling list of hotels and flights, kind of like deals that kind of give you some ideas on where to go. So,
yeah, and along the design touches as well, there's one loading screen, I think, where it's like a airplane window, and you can actually like open the window and close the window as well. It's like really cool.
Yeah, if you do a flight search, I think you can play with the kind of the shade on the window.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
flights.
I'm not sure if we can.
Yeah,
do
so
it.
not the entire app is tablet optimized, but certainly the this immediate screen. Okay, so let's move on. Just take our word for it. Check out Expedia on your phone. It's really awesome. The next app is Flipboard. So I don't think Flipboard needs too much of an introduction, but it's again a very simple. Now optimized for Android tablet screens. If you probably switch back to the phone mode, that's fine. So Flipboard is kind of an interactive magazine. It I guess aggregates everything from Facebook to Google Plus to tech blogs to news to things like that, and puts it in this kind of unique UI. And as you can see here, just from the beginning, it's very, it immediately starts acting. It starts zooming in photos, panning photos. And it really is immersive. You open this and you really feel like you're getting, a full view of your content. So let's actually flip through this page, and actually you'll notice that they have this kind of unique Flipboard interaction. That's kind of that's the same across all their different platforms. I believe that's kind of their branding. Is that it's part of their branding, that like kind of that flip. So if we open up one of these items, you'll notice that. It's still very much customized. The UI is, again, just like some of the other apps that we talked about. It's very much about the content. There's minimal Chrome. It kind of recedes, fades out of the way. But they are, like in Grand Street's case, they're using their visual styling, but applying our interaction design and I guess UI pattern best practices. So they still have the up button in the top left. They still have the overflow that gives you kind of additional things. They do have this additional option for navigation there, but whatever. And they do have search in the top right, which is kind of the standard place to expose search. But all throughout, their kind of flipping UI is still there, and so it still feels like Flipboard, just kind of customized for Android. And then if you open up one of these articles, you notice that again they include kind of large margins on the sides. They tweak the font sizes and line spacing, especially to make sure that on a tablet things look great. And they don't really have a top action bar here, but they do have kind of like a split action bar. We'll kind of give them that. And basically all the actions are available at the bottom right. And then with an overflow, as you'd expect. So yeah, so Flipboard, overall, really custom visual styling, but still following a lot of our information, well, not really information, but interaction design best practices.
All right, better get a move on, as always. Last is TED, right?
Yep.
All right, so TED, hopefully you're familiar with it. They post up some great free TED Talks to inspire you. This app actually follows the sort of Holo design language quite closely. They've just customized the colors accordingly to fit in really nicely with the TED colors, which is just sort of the white and red. The focus purely on content. You see these just great big large video thumbnails, multi-column, again scales very well to different screen sizes. You can swipe between the tabs here, between these three main tabs, My Talks, All Talks, and Featured. I've got these sort of three larger banner images at the top here to promote the featured or latest. And then again, once you're viewing the talks, you can swipe between the talks very nicely here. It's a great app. Hopefully a lot of you have seen it before. There's really not that much more to say other than that they've done a really good job merging TED brand with Android Holo.
Yeah. Solid. Okay.
Yeah. All right. We've got one more. Yeah.
So those are the 11 apps in the Beautiful Design Collection Summer 2013. If you just search for Beautiful Design 2013, you should find our blog post announcing it, and I think that it's currently visible in Google Play if you go to apps and scroll all the way to the bottom. Now, there's one more app we wanted to talk about. Nick, do you want to talk about Timely?
Yeah, so this is a new app that launched just yesterday, I think, which is a alarm and stopwatch and timer application. But I really love this app. So I think the one word which I would use to summarize this app is polish. Every single thing you do in this application is extremely polished. So, from right here, we can show, so this panel on the right-hand side showing the current time is like the main display. So on the phone app, this would be the launch screen. And I love the way that as you swipe between the three major tabs, that content always stays persistent. So whether it's kind of like larger when you're in the center view or over on the side, kind of it's a really fun way to kind of use the extra space on larger devices. But as Roman's kind of swiping around, you can see the the changes in the background color and the subtly moving background images. Everything about this application screams polish. So I think one of the fun things, they have a lot of custom items in here. So like the background, for example, is very, very custom, and you can even go ahead and tweak the colors on that, which is kind of fun. So if you go into like the overflow menu and change themes, and then click on that little thing, you have this really, really fun kind of like color picker that lets you just completely customize this application to whatever color scheme you want. And I really love that. I think it's actually quite a clever marketing idea that lets you kind of do the full customization, but if you want to save it, that's an in-app purchase. So I think it's really fun, like, to demonstrate its value before, charging you for that. If you want to show the stopwatch and timer. So, for example, if you look at the interaction used for setting a timer, actually your stopwatch is fine.
Okay, stopwatch. Go ahead.
Just having too much fun here.
So hopefully the frame rate is picking it up here, but you have this kind of like almost like a heartbeat. You see the pulse like moving around the circle, tracking the time as it goes up. Little details like that, they've gone beyond the level of just having the time ticking up. They actually have these beautiful interactive animations. And if you go to the timer as well, I think very similar to the timer application we looked at before, they have a very visceral way of setting it, but these beautifully engaging kind of animations. And I love the way it kind of like, as you go past the minute or hour or whatever that is, it kind of how it shrinks in and grows out. Also,
one of the coolest things is that the text actually morphs. So 6 morphs into 5 into 4 and so on. So I don't know how they're doing that, but it's really, really cool. One thing that I want to mention is that they've actually, I feel like they've done a crazy good job of styling everything to fit their almost like transparent UI. So even the settings, right? Even the settings screen that you'd expect to be kind of boring is, has this kind of immersive, interactive, I guess, animated background, and all of the controls just like blend beautifully on top of it. So I mean, they've just done an insanely good job on that.
Yeah, so just animations, polish everywhere. Like this app is incredibly polished, and I think they've done a wonderful job.
They have a lot of nice,
love that interaction.
Animations. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's.
I think that's all the time we have, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're a bit.
Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for joining. And yeah, just one last reminder: if you haven't seen this collection, if you haven't downloaded and installed some of these apps, definitely make sure to do so. Just search for Beautiful Design Summer 2013, and you'll get there. All right, that's it.
And the challenge to all you designers out there, as Roman said at the top of the show, the plan is to update this collection periodically. So we're going to cycle out some apps, bring in some new apps. So this is really a challenge for you designers out there. This is the goal you want to be aiming for, is to be getting into this collection. So let's see what you can do.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
See you
guys.
later.
Bye.